Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Tillman with another Tillman Take. Now, today's take is going to be on the recent shooting of Jayland Walker, which occurred in Ohio on, it looks like, June 27th, 2022. So this is all recent, and the reason it's so trendy right now is because they just released the body-worn camera. So what we're going to do today is I'm actually going to play the video that's been going viral, and then we're actually going to work backwards, and we're going to talk about whether or not this shooting was justified or not. Right now, it looks like the force that they used may have been excessive, but that's what we're here to talk about. So let's get into it.
Ryan Tillman, real talk, it's the truth.
Now, as you guys can see, you guys can understand why it appears to be excessive. Right now, the reports are showing that, they believe that over 90 rounds were fired. 60 rounds potentially hit Jayland from the officer's handguns. But again, that's all preliminary just because they haven't done the autopsy yet, or at least they haven't given the results of the autopsy. And that's important to notate because if we're talking about over 60 rounds, some of those rounds could be entry and exit wounds. So it could classify as two hits, but it's really not classified as two because you have an entry and exit. So that's why that's all preliminary stuff. But a lot of people have been sending me this video wondering whether or not it is excessive. So what we're going to do today is we're going to actually walk backwards, and we're going to determine, a lot of the stuff that you hear today is, again, my opinion. But I want you guys to be considerate of the family. Obviously, it sucks, and I've talked about this, I don't know how many videos I made, that the loss of life in general always sucks, no matter who it is. Even if they were doing something they shouldn't have been doing, the loss of life sucks, because at the end of the day, Jayland Walker, he was somebody's brother, he was somebody's son, he may have been somebody's dad, who knows, but he's still alive, and so life was lost. So again, my heart goes out to the family. But let's talk about whether or not his actions put him in the situation that we just watched. So in order to get started, we have to talk about why the officers even contacted Jayland Walker in the first place. And so officers conducted a traffic stop on Jayland Walker, and he failed to yield. So this situation actually turned into a vehicle pursuit. But what's interesting, what happened during this vehicle pursuit is as the officers chasing behind him, there was a flash that came from the window of the car. And not only was there a flash that came from the window, but the officer actually broadcast it out as the guy they're chasing actually just fired at him. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of rewind real quick. I'm going to go down to the part where we actually see the flash that comes from the surveillance video, and we'll talk about that here in a second.
At the time of the sound, a flash of light can be seen along the driver's side of the suspect vehicle.
So it's going to give an arrow here in a second, and then it's going to actually freeze frame it. There goes the suspect vehicle. See there goes the flash of light. So it's kind of hard to see, but there's a flash of light. That's so important because the officer actually broadcasts on radio traffic that, hey, the suspect just fired at me. And so that's what that flash of light is. Now, it looks like, I don't know where the surveillance video is from, but now the officer, you have to think about mindset. And anytime we are breaking down or evaluating these videos, we have to start talking about the mindset of the officer that's giving chase. So not only is the officer that's directly involved, meaning the officer that's right behind Jayland, he now believes the suspect is firing at him with a gun, which, is later determined that it was a gun. And so when he broadcasts that on the radio, what are the other responding officers thinking? We got a guy that our partner is chasing who's shooting at police officers. So again, that goes to mindset. So now what we're going to do is I want to now fast forward. We're going to go to 17:45 of this video. And if you guys are wondering where I'm getting a lot of this information from, I actually watched, there's about a 45-minute press conference that was just released. And so I always encourage people, Go watch the press conference. Go do your research. I had so many people just send me the 30-second snapshot of this video, and some people were saying, oh, this is wrong. They shot him. He was unarmed. It was excessive, all this other stuff. So I went out and just watched the 45-minute press conference to get as much information as I could get. Now, keep in mind, my take is not going to be the ultimate conclusion. There's still a long investigation. And I will say shout out to the family on this one, is because they're not promoting any violence. They're not promoting any violent protests or anything like that. They're saying, hey, let the investigation take its place, and whatever comes, we'll see what happens. So let's go back to what I was talking about. So these are the reasons. So you have a vehicle pursuit. The suspect exited on the Archway ramp. The pursuit proceeded through the city streets. Vehicle slowed down. The suspects exited from the passenger side of the moving vehicle. So he's a solo occupant of this vehicle, and when he exits with the ski mask, and that's what we're going to watch right now. Let's take a look. So this is a freeze frame getting out of the car. Important to notate. So now, you know, the driver now goes to the passenger side, has a ski mask on. I know COVID is, you know, we still having COVID, but, you know, a lot of people aren't wearing masks as much as they are. And then you're wearing a ski mask, which means the mouth is cut out. So again, why is this information so important is because we have to start thinking about, as an officer, I'm evaluating my mind. What am I working with right now? I tried to conduct a traffic stop. Once I went and did the traffic stop, the guy fled from me. I see him get out of the car. He has a ski mask on, which, that tells me, this guy's probably out, might be committing burglaries, armed robberies, who knows? But a ski mask is not common behavior for the time of night. So let's fast forward, and what I want to do now is I want to go to the moment in time where they freeze frame it. So we're going to go 1820, and this is what is very interesting about this whole video. So let's watch this part. So what I'm about to show you is the freeze frame of when Jayland gets out of the car and he's running from officers. Now, when we watched the video initially, it was like super fast. Like we couldn't see everything that happened. It just happened like crazy fast. But this actually, let me back up real quick. The officers attempted to deploy a taser. So as they're running, they're chasing after Jayland. He gets out of the passenger seat. The officers attempt to deploy the taser. The tasers are unsuccessful. Therefore, he keeps running. You fast forward. This is what we actually see from the body cam after they freeze the frame. This is what we see. Let's watch.
Quickly turn towards the pursuing officers.
So you pause it. So this is actually him turning towards the officers. So Jayland turned towards the officer. You can see his hands down at his side. Now, this is what's interesting about this is we're watching this on video. It's hard to see in video. This is dark outside. You can see there's some lights off in the distance, but it's pretty dark. And so the officers, not a lot of light for them to work with, one. And two, Jayland turns towards them and he's reaching for his waistband. Now, I want you to remember something. Remember, the initial officer broadcast as he's in the vehicle pursuit that the suspect shot at him from his window. So we know that you're dealing with a suspect that's armed and shooting at officers, or at least believed to be shooting at officers. Now they're chasing him. They deploy the taser, which is ineffective. And then at a moment in time, they see this, and a guy turns towards them looking at the officers. Now, I asked you the question as a civilian, as a viewer of this video, knowing the things that we know now, what is going to be your next action? Are we going to try to deploy the taser again? Are we going to try to deploy the beanbag? Are we going to try to deploy pepper spray? Or are you going to deploy your gun and try to stop that threat? Utilize deadly force. The other question we have to ask ourselves, is deadly force warranted in this given situation? So if you ask me, at this moment in time, deadly force is warranted. Why? Because you have a guy that fled from officers, a guy that shot at officers now. So now you're working with a potential attempted murder or assault with a deadly weapon. The guy footbills out of his car. He's wearing a ski mask, so you know the guy's not up to no good. We try to tase him. That taser was ineffective, and now you're dealing with the guy as dark outside. He turns toward you, and now you have to make a split-second decision. Now, I just did a video the other day that was called 0 to 100 real quick, and I think it have over like 300,000 views on it. And the reason why it's going so viral is because people saw how fast it takes for an officer to make a split second. I showed another one where an officer is trying to stop a guy that's coming at him with a machete. So an officers only have a split second to make a decision. Now the question becomes, and this is why it's so controversial, is because officers fired so many rounds at him. I think right now they said he shot about 60 times. Now, the interesting thing to consider about this situation is that there were 8 officers on scene. Now, I did another video way back in the day where we showed officers, multiple officers on scene, a whole bunch of officers dealing with a guy who pulls out a gun, starts to shoot at the officer, and you just see this, you hear this whole barrage of fire. It was crazy. It was like, sound like it was on a gun line. And one of the points I made up in that video is that you have to realize that every officer in that situation has their own perspective. And when they're looking and viewing at a situation from their own perspective, they have to make a decision for themselves as to whether or not they feel like their life is in danger. So keep in mind, if you're one of these officers on scene, you're chasing this guy, and as you're chasing him, he turns towards you and he starts to reach towards his waistband, which is what they're saying right now. You have to make a decision. And so they all pull the trigger. So now if you have 8 officers pulling the trigger on their handgun about 6 to 7, 10 times maybe, now it sounds why. Now you can understand why there's so much gunfire. Now this is not me justifying. I'm going to be clear on that. So, and I'll tell you why that's important to notate in a second. But now you can understand why it sounds like so much gunfire, because you have 8 officers, their own individual perspective. They all feel like their life is in danger. And for all they don't know who he's going to point the gun at, if he's going to shoot at somebody and stuff like that. So they all let off some rounds. Now, if you've never gone to the range before, it is very easy to let off 10 rounds in a matter of a couple seconds. Super easy. So you got to think about the mind now. The last thing I want you to think about is think about the mind, how the mind perceives the threat, responds to a threat, and then reacts to that threat. When that all happens within a matter of seconds. And so if you feel like your life is in danger, pop, 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 because you don't know what's going on. It's not like, oh, boom, let me see if it works. Oh, nope, let me shoot again. It doesn't work like that in real life. We just got to keep that in mind. So the reason I said that I'm not making excuses or I'm not saying it's justified or anything like that is because I'm saying that every officer is going to have to account for every round that they fired, which means that when they are invested, when they do their interviews, they're going to have to be able to explain why they fired so many times. And then if they better have a reasonable explanation. But we can't jump to conclusions to say that the officers are automatically wrong, because we have to understand what their mindset was and why they determined to utilize so many rounds to stop the threat. So I asked you the question, I asked a buddy of mine this morning, if an officer deems something to be deadly force, or they deem a situation warrants deadly force, can you have excessive force in a deadly force situation? It's a good question, right? Now, take it a step further. Obviously, as officers, we're trained to stop the threat. Sometimes by stopping a threat, that means you have to utilize deadly force. Well, can deadly force be excessive? Now, the way I think deadly force can be excessive is if I shoot a person, let's say I shoot a person 7 or 8 times, he drops to the ground, and then I go up and I shoot him some more. That could be excessive. But if a person in a matter of seconds turn towards me and I have to make a split-second decision, I fire 10 shots, pop, 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 to stop that threat, can that deadly force be deemed excessive? I don't know if it can. So those are things that you have to keep in mind, and that's why there's an investigation that goes into all of this stuff. But a lot of the rumors that came out initially were, hey, Jayland was running, he was unarmed. Now that brings me to my next point. Was Jayland unarmed at this moment in time when the officers confronted him? Yes, he was unarmed. But keep in mind, although he was unarmed, he was shooting at officers in a pursuit that was just seconds before this. The other thing to keep in mind is, let me go to 1906. And again, I encourage all you guys, if you guys haven't done this yet, go back and look at the video. But let me go here. At 1906, this is there's video right here. There's the still photos that actually shows the gun that he had in his car. So it was determined that he did have a firearm in that car. And it's most likely he's the one that fired that round outside of the car at the officers. And so think about the transition of how fast it happened. The officers are chasing the guy. They're running after. He bails out of his car. As they run, they tase. It doesn't work. Then the guy turns at him really, really quickly. Now they have to make a split-second decision. So I can see why they chose to utilize deadly force in this scenario, because he just fired at them moments beforehand. And so I think that pretty much covers everything. And so the ultimately what's going to happen is they got to determine whether or not the force was justified or not. You asked me, based on everything we know at the time of the call, the reason for the stop, him firing at officers, him reaching for his waistband. I think though they will determine that the deadly force at that time was warranted. The questions are going to become, why did they shoot so much? I've already told you before why it's plausible that it can happen. I'm not justifying their action. I'm just saying this is what typically happens if you have a whole bunch of officers on scene and you're viewing things from your perspective and you try to stop that threat. That's why it sounds like there's a lot of fire, which there was a lot of fire, but they're going to have to be able to answer for that. So anyways, guys, I hope this kind of gives you guys some clarity. I think I touched on a lot of the things that were going on. I mean, a lot of people were saying, again, that they shot him that he was unarmed, which he was unarmed, but they didn't give the context as to why they shot in the first place, which I kind of gave you guys some context here. And then the other thing, the last thing I want to make sure you guys understand is that, you know, at the end of the day, we have the ability to watch this situation and slow it down, freeze frame stuff. Those officers don't. A lot of times people think that I automatically defend officers. I don't always automatically defend officers. There's been officers that have done wrong, and I've called them out, and I've taken heat for it. But at the end of the day, what I am here to do is I want to tell you guys the mindset, what's reasonable, what's not, based from a place of experience, where I've been in situations where I've chased people, I've been in officer-involved shooting, all these other things. These are experiences that I've had, and everything I express to you is my opinion. And so when you see this video as it's going viral, make sure you guys give people the context that I'm giving you, because sadly what's happening right now is a lot of times people aren't given the context that's necessary to determine whether or not a situation is justified or not. So keep that in mind, guys. I want to hear what you guys think in the comments box. Tell me what you guys think. Was this justified? Was this not? Is it excessive? What do you think? Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, so that way if we can continue to grow this channel if you feel like it's resourceful for you and your community. With that being said, take care, God bless, and have a good one.
Ryan Tillman, real talk, it's the truth.